And welcome everyone to another interview with a training from the back of the room trainer. And today I'm talking to Deni Dayan. And Deni, tell people where you live and what you do. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm happy to be here. I live in Fresno, California, and I'm a school psychologist, and I do lots of trainings in the areas of trauma and positive discipline and mindfulness.
And some people who are watching these interviews may not know that I'm also a positive discipline trainer, and that's how Deni and I met. I don't know how many years ago, maybe 10?
Something like that. Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah. So I want the audience to know a little bit about training from the back of the room, because most people have not heard of training from the back of the room, and the title is even a little confusing for them. So I'd like to start with asking you to describe training from the back of the room. What kind of training workshop or event is this?
Okay, so I actually learned about training from the back of the room from you, and I just love the way you incorporate it into positive discipline. And so training from the back of the room for me is a way to make trainings a lot more engaging and interactive, taking into account how human beings learn based on what we know about the brain. And so that's how I would describe it. Forget what else am I answering?
That's it. That's just because when I say this training is called training from the back of the room, people just look at me like, I don't know what you're talking about, and how would you train from the back of the room?
So, oh, yeah. So the other thing, I did my training in San Diego, and I was the only person in education in the room. Everyone else was from Silicon Valley, and everyone was very much in the like tech world, and they've just kind of embraced training from the back of the room, especially people that are involved with Agile and Scrum. And so that was kind of the first that I've heard of those like styles of learning and presenting and working, which was really interesting as well.
Yes, and so the other interviews I've done, then we talk a little bit about Agile and Scrum. So for people who don't know what that is, you can get an explanation in my interview with Jean-Paul. So if you're interested in that, learn more in that other interview.
Yes, because I could not explain it.
No,
I'm not Agile nor Scrum.
It's been explained to me several times, and I still couldn't tell you what either one of those things are.
Yeah, I couldn't do it justice, so I won't try.
Yeah, and it is kind of complex, so. Okay, back to training from the back of the room, because Deni is also a training from the back of the room trainer, as I am. And I want to know, first of all, what's your favorite concept or tool or strategy from training from the back of the room?
Well, it's hard to limit my favorites because I just love so many. But if I had to start, I'd probably start with the very beginning part of the training, which is the objective vote. I think that having a nice direction of where your training is going is so important, and it's so boring to read the learning objectives, and so to have people actually read them themselves and take a vote and have some weigh-in as to what they're interested in learning about is one of my favorite tools. And sometimes, I was going to say sometimes I adapt that, and I have people kind of try to convince each other at tables to vote on just one of the learning goals, so that way people start discussing the content and connect with each other as well. And so that would bring me to my second favorite, is any connecting activity from the very beginning that is content related. I love that because it gets people learning from the very moment they walk into the room.
So for people who have not attended the training, can you tell them a little bit more about the dot voting that goes on with those learning objectives, just maybe in a minute, 60 seconds, 60 to 90 seconds, about how that goes?
Yeah, so I did. So in the training from the back of the room workshop, Sharon actually puts up the learning objectives, and we get dots, and we go up to it, and we put the dots next to the ones that we're interested in learning about. And then we all stand around, and it's a way to people get out of their seats and look at where people are interests lie, where their interests are. And I don't do it that way now. Sometimes I do, but sometimes I just have it on a PowerPoint, and I have them numbered. And so then I have them raise their hand individually, or I have them vote as tables, as I mentioned. Or sometimes I even have it in their handouts, the objectives for them to read in their handouts, and then circle the ones they're interested in. So I've kind of played with the idea in several ways.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's what Sharon has told us to do. Once you go to your first training from the back of the room training, she says, take these ideas and adapt them and use them to fit with the content that you teach, and try out different things. And I love that spirit of hers, that she says, take this and run with it.
I know, I love that too. It's and it's so much fun. It just, for me, it makes training, it just makes it so much fun. And also because, you know, at some point it gets boring just listening to one person talk all the time. And, you know, the attention span is about 10 to 15 minutes. And so it's so helpful to have a book full of ideas of how to mix it up.
Yes, and just like you said, each idea, I can usually think of 10 different ways to use the one idea that I learned from Sharon. You know, just with all the other things she's taught us, I'm like, well, I could do it this way or this way or this way. So if you come to training from the back of the room, know that you will learn so many ideas, but each of those ideas can be adapted in many ways.
Exactly.
So,
yeah, and so, for example, I did a training this last week where I couldn't do individual voting because there were too many people, and so that's why I had them do table voting. And so sometimes I'm adapting it on the fly depending on the room and how it shows up. And sometimes I can't prepare for that.
right.
So it's really nice to have that freedom.
And that to me is just, again, I just keep going on and on about the flexibility of this. But since I've learned all the training from the back of the room tools, like you, I feel like I can adapt very easily to whatever I walk into.
Exactly. Me too.
So next question, how have you used training from the back of the room so far? So what kind of groups have you used it with, or what kind of topics? You can expand on any of that you want to.
Okay. Well, I've done a couple of, one I did for early childhood educators, and I made a really fun game for concept centers. We did a milestone sorting activity. So everybody had to take the milestones and by age group and figure out which milestones go with each age group. And that was a lot more challenging than people would have thought. And so I think people really stretched their brains and learned a lot from that activity. I've also done trauma trainings. And so we did a true false around the impact of trauma, which was kind of makes it interesting and interactive, and the wording that I use is vague in some of them, so it really invites a lot of discussion and debate amongst the participants. I've also done probably my favorite thing I've done is we talk about the brain, and in positive discipline we talk about brain in the palm of the hand. Well, I actually made a brain game where people have to put the 3 parts of the triune brain in order, and then each part of the brain has their functions and a symbol associated with each function. And it is such a fun game, and it's such a nice way to review the brain. Yeah, so like for the limbic system, or let's say the brainstem, fight, flight, freeze, I have like a white surrender flag for freeze, and I have a sword for fight, and a shield where you run away for flight. And they have to know that that goes in the brainstem, and then they associate it with the pictures. It's really fun.
So I'm hoping I might see this soon, like sometime when we're attending our positive discipline.
Yeah, I make so many copies and I share them with people. Like, and this early childhood education, I use that in that training as well. And some of the trainings I've done in Spanish. So I have all of the concepts in Spanish and English. So I just trade out the like word parts and keep the pictures the same depending on what language group I'm working with, which makes it really cool too.
We need some time to just need to hear about all the stuff you've done with training from the back of the room since you've been, because we haven't had time to catch up about this.
No, we really haven't.
No. Okay, I'm going to move on. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just saying those were a few things that I've done that were fun. The last thing I was going to mention is I have a worksheet that I have people do as a third concept center, where they have to notice, like I list some challenging behaviors, but then they have to think of the positive opposite of that behavior, so that when they're working with students, they're looking for the absence of behavior, which is very hard to do. So when you name it, so like if your challenge is that they're always out of their seat, then the positive opposite would be staying in their seat. And then I have the last column is for them to write a descriptive encouragement statement for that positive opposite behavior. And I have them identify which are their most significant triggers, so that when they're back in the classroom, it's easy for them to go, oh yeah, getting out of the seat is my number one trigger that flips my lid. And now I know what I'm looking for instead of when they get out of the seat. And I know exactly what to say when I see that positive behavior. So that was another kind of fun activity that we use.
Man, yeah, we need to talk another time so we can get all of our positive discipline stuff. So, because I know the learners or the people watching this interview may not know some of the ideas we're talking about with flipping your lid and with positive discipline. But I can do some other videos and teach that later.
Okay.
So thank you for that. And then next, what do you think that training from the back of the room concepts and tools offers to the learners in any time you're using these tools and concepts? What does it offer the learners in the room?
Well, I've heard it said that you retain about 10% of a traditional training. And so for me, what it offers the learners is the opportunity to retain a little bit more than 10%, because I pause a lot more often and I have people really reflect. What are the insights you've gotten so far in the training? What do you want to remember? Write a note to your future self, because you're going to forget, and then discuss it with a partner. So my hope is that it really helps to cement the learning, because we're doing reviews, we're presenting it the first time, reviewing, talking about it, writing. So that's really what I hope my intention in using training from the back of the room is, that people actually learn and retain what they're learning.
All right, thank you. And then what do you think training from the back of the room concepts and tools offers you as the trainer, the instructor, the facilitator, that role?
Well, I definitely have more fun, because it feels more of a fun atmosphere. It's more interactive, and I'm not all the weight of the learning isn't on my shoulders. It's a shared weight. So as a presenter, I don't feel any pressure to know everything or to keep people entertained for like 2 days straight. I can have them entertain each other and connect with each other. So it takes some of the burden off of me as well. And once I've got my concept centers down, it's really easy for me to just jump in and I can kind of sit back and let the training kind of happen.
Yeah, I love concept centers, because I feel like the learners are doing so much and I get a little bit of a break. I'm walking around and observing, but I get to breathe for a few minutes and be off stage.
Exactly. It's more relaxing that way. Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'll have another interview where I just talk about what are concept centers, because we keep talking about them, but many people won't know what they are. But it's really when the groups are busy with some tasks that you've given them and you're not having to do anything at the moment, because you've given them printed instructions and a task to be focused on.
Yeah.
And then I realized I didn't introduce myself to the audience yet. I'm Kelly Pfeiffer with Go Interactive Training. Forgot to say that. I did that on the last interview too. I interviewed the guest and forgot to interview myself. I introduced the guest and forgot to introduce myself to the audience, in case this is their first video that they're watching from me.
Okay.
And then next question, what do you want people to know about training from the back of the room, especially people who are thinking they might want to attend this training or enroll in the training if they're a trainer, facilitator, or teacher?
I would highly encourage you to take the training, because it will increase your efficacy as a trainer and will make your learners very grateful, because it's now a pet peeve to go to any training that doesn't use training from the back of the room, because it's so dry and boring and I hate it. It's terrible. It's conditioned me in a bad way because it's so hard to sit still, and I think of all the ways that their trainings could be improved if they would just take this workshop. So if anything, it would just take you up like probably 5-6 notches if you took the training from the back of the room.
Thanks for that, because I agree. I'm like, this changed my life as a trainer. It just
Yes, and cursed me at the same time because it's so bad.
But I was amazed, and I want to hear what you think. I was amazed at how much I learned in 2 days, and now that I teach it, like how far people come from the time they walk in the room on day 1 to the time they leave on day 2. They are amazed at how much they've learned. That's what I've
Oh, yeah. It's incredible. And then what's great is that you kind of, you have the resources to go back to that really help you start utilizing it yourself. And for me, I'm teaching this inside my organization. And so I've already had 2 different like groups of people, foster youth and cultural competency, approach me and help me work on their PowerPoints and incorporate some activities. So it's really fun if you're able to consult with someone after you've taken the training to like jump ideas off of. And I know Sharon does a nice job of clicking people together and creating a platform for that to happen. It's really nice to be able to talk about it with other people.
Oh, definitely it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, if people are interested in taking a training from the back of the room, training from you or talking to you about it, what's the best way to get in touch with you in Fresno?
Well, I'm very limited as to how much I do outside of Fresno County Office of Education. So if you happen to be in Fresno County, then you could just, look me up in the Fresno County directory. And I'm not really doing any trainings outside of that at the moment, unless I do one with you, Kelly. But for the most part, I'm really not, out there, I suppose.
So you're mainly using it in-house for your own work and then with your office mates and the people that you're working with in the school district.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe one day I'll venture out when I retire. Or I have so much on my plate right now.
Well, and Deni and I are planning on offering a 2-day training from the back of the room training in Seattle, Washington in 2019 in July.
Yes, we are. And it's going to be so much fun.
Yes, we've never trained together. And now we're going to come together to do training from the back of the room. And I predict that we're going to have more fun than any other day of the year. So
I think so too.
Okay, is there anything else that you think people need to know about training from the back of the room before we close out?
No, I think that's it. I made notes before. The only thing that I noticed, there's one thing I haven't said, and one of them is how one of the things I've been most impressed by is one of the things Sharon talks about is creating a symbol to represent a learning of a certain concept. And when I do this, it is so interesting to see the images that people come up with and what it looks like and feels like to use a different part of your brain. It's fantastic. And I would say that's probably a third. One of my favorite things to do is ask people to add a symbol to a concept. So like, for example, when I do mindfulness, we do some specific activities and then I'll say, describe what that was like for you and then create a symbol to represent that. And it's just really neat what comes out of people's minds, or even a learning goal. Write your personal learning goal and then create a symbol that represents your learning goal. It's fantastic. So that would be the last thing I'd say.
I love that one too. But do you find that people sometimes struggle or say, well, what do you mean? Or they get quiet and they really have to work hard at this because they're not used to doing it? Or what's your experience?
Very little. And if they do, I'll give them an example and I'll just describe one. But for the most part, and I'll say if you're, sometimes people's drawing is a hang up. It's like, I'm a horrible drawer. I don't know how to do it. And I'll say, even if you can picture the symbol in your mind and describe it, even if you can't write it, draw it, that's fine too. And so that seems to help a little bit.
Yeah, people have been, I think, conditioned, some people have been conditioned to think that their drawing is going to be judged or something.
Yeah. Or it has to look exactly the way they have it in their brain. And if it doesn't look matched identically, then it's like really shameful or something
Yeah.
horrible is going to happen. They'll get an F on the assignment. I don't know. But that's so then they can describe it with words if that's more comfortable.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, Deni, thank you so much. And
That's my pleasure.
thanks to everyone who watched the entire interview. If you have questions about training from the back of the room, you can contact either one of us. And again, thanks to the audience. And thank you, Deni, for joining us.
Thanks, Kelly, for interviewing me.
All right. Bye, everyone.